I'm gonna give you some of the worst speed exercises and movements that you can use to replace them, and we're gonna start right now. I'm Olympic strength coach Dane Miller. I've coached at 10 world championships. I've helped athletes and coaches develop comprehensive programs to help earn them NCAA scholarships, starting spots on their high school team, and even go to the Olympics. And when we're talking about speed, we have to think about the lens of speed: acceleration, change of direction, top speed. Okay, how fast can we actually move? So everything that we're gonna be targeting is gonna be going through that specific lens. I love bodybuilding training. I love using bodybuilding inside of sports performance. I think it has a pretty substantial impact, especially at the lower level of athletes. Okay, if we have a novice beginner athlete, if we can use some real good bodybuilding principles, we're gonna see that carry over to their long-term progress, especially in the world of speed. Now, with that being said, one of the worst exercises that you can do to get faster is going to be the leg press. Now, I know a lot of people might lose their mind here, okay, because we know, that when we're doing the leg press, we're targeting the quads, okay? So if I'm gonna get set here, I'd be lighting up my quads. And we know that the quads are responsible for acceleration. They're really responsible for that starting position, okay? And especially in that hip flexion here. Now, the big aspect is when I'm locked out, I'm still holding hip flexion. I'm targeting the crap out of my quads right here, but that doesn't mean it's the absolute best. Now, with that being said, I've used the leg press with other sports like sprint cycling, where we've used something like a single leg banded leg press. Okay, so if you get a little bit more dynamic, you can do it single leg, you can do it bilateral, you can do it explosive, and you'll have a little bit better carryover. If you want to absolutely use the leg press no matter what, you don't want to not use it to run faster. The biggest thing that I recommend is keeping those reps below 8. I wouldn't load the machine up too heavy, and I would just focus on a big explosion at the top. And that's where I think using something like a banded leg press can actually be more beneficial to developing that speed. But in all reality, I just still wouldn't use a leg press to get faster. Okay, so in the past, I've talked about this exercise being used by some of the best sprint coaches in the world. And again, I love bodybuilding movements. I love building a massive amount of muscle on frames of athletes. However, one of the aspects around speed is how relatively strong an individual is. So based off their body weight, how strong are they, how explosive are they relative to their body weight? If we build too much muscle mass in areas that is not used to run faster, then we have a large amount of muscle that's technically not going to be as applied, okay? Because we're having an excess of weight, which can then have a negative impact on relative strength. That was a long explanation. Now, the next exercise is going to be the bench press. So I've actually talked about Ben Johnson and Charlie Francis using the bench press as a means of increasing global recruitment. However, one of the big factors here is that the bench press can get you super hypertrophic in your upper body. So maybe in a fall or a preparation period, okay, you can use the bench press to increase that global recruitment. But as we get closer to peak or closer to the season, okay, one of the big factors that I would do is actually remove the bench press. The pecs, the shoulders, the triceps aren't really going to help us run faster. And if we do want to have some hypertrophy in our upper body, or even some greater global recruitment, what I would do is do something like a dumbbell alternating press, okay? So here, and we're doing an alternating dumbbell press. That's gonna force us to focus on trunk stability while we're pressing. So that can be something that we can do, say, 12 weeks out from a peak. Then as we get closer, let's say we're at 8 weeks or 6 weeks, something like that, now we can remove that and just start focusing on clap push-ups. The clap push-ups will actually have a greater impact on how quickly our nervous system can fire, okay? So using the bench press to increase global recruitment is okay if we're way far out in our periodization and we're just focusing on general prep. But as we get closer to that peak, again, let's take out the bench press, focus on some other movement like a plyometric, so a clap push-up, and that's going to lead to better speed results. Okay, so the next worst exercise for speed, I've actually started to change my tune a little bit, especially in recent lives. I've started to see that this exercise might not be the devil that I once thought it was, and I'm starting to see it a little bit more progressively. However, in regards to speed, if we think about acceleration and whipping from the hip and bringing that knee up and then putting force back down, and if we think about being at top end speed or even just being fast in general, we have to have really good mobility in the hip, and our ankle has to be very mobile as well. This exercise, supposedly Louis Simmons used to get Butch Reynolds to win the Olympics in 1988. Whether or not Louis Simmons actually had a positive or negative impact on Butch Reynolds, I have no idea. However, with this discussion, the movement that I would avoid would be the deadlift. Now, the reason being is that when we think about like the spinal engine and being as mobile as possible, okay, I think we tend to put ourselves in a rounded position in the deadlift. The other aspect is that we've seen quite a bit of athletes get very, very tight hip flexors from consistent deadlifting. And when we have tight hip flexors, we might lead to really poor back end mechanics. Okay, we might start to be leaning forward quite a bit, not be able to bring that hip through as actively as possible, and that in turn could have a poor impact on our turnover. Does that mean you should never ever deadlift? I don't think so. I'm changing that quite a bit, but I wouldn't take a beginner athlete who I'm trying to get faster and have them do deadlifts all the time. Instead, I would take advice from every single world-class sprinter. When I was at Europeans this past year, I was in the weight room and there was 33 individuals that came in the 1 hour that I was in there. Every single athlete out of the 33, every single one did some type of weightlifting variation, meaning they did a power snatch, a close grip snatch, a power clean, a split snatch, a split clean, a split jerk, a close grip power snatch. Every single movement that you could think of. 33 of the world's best athletes, most explosive, fastest athletes that you could think of were moving weight fast. So we can get our younger athletes to learn how to execute a power snatch. Or if we can just take advice from the world's fastest athlete right now, Noah Lyles, we can execute a power clean, but we're gonna do a power snatch right now. Boom, boom, one more, boom, okay? So we can start with moving weight as quickly as possible, and then with our younger athletes, as they get more mobile, as they get more explosive, the next thing that we can do is bring in some auditory commands. Okay? We can get them to learn how to be explosive right off the start. We can have them pause in the beginning and then give them a clap to initiate their set, okay? Another movement that I also like using would be a snatch pull. And one thing that I notice, especially at world championships, you'll see as athletes start to peak, they'll do this type of snatch pull consistently, or clean pull consistently. And the reason being is it helps them establish some type of rhythm, okay? So they'll get set with their grip. Oh, they'll go here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Think about reacting as quickly as possible. There's gonna be a quick loading through, and they're thinking about applying as much force as possible on the floor. Now, one other factor I wanted to bring up. When we're sprinting at top speed, the best sprinters in the world will exhibit about 4 to 5 times their body weight of ground reaction forces into the ground, 4 to 5 times. When we catch a clean, that's around 80% in the hole. Each foot is exhibiting 2.5 to 3 times body weight with the ground reaction force of the body weight of that athlete. So if we can learn how to catch a clean in the hole early on in preparation, that helps us with handling a large amount of ground reaction forces. And then as we get closer and closer to our peak, now our nervous system is able to utilize or express those ground reaction forces even at top speed, and that can be playing an integral part of our overall preparation to run fast. The next exercise that I would argue is probably the worst for running, for sprinting at high speeds, actually involves running. Okay, but not any type of running, okay? One factor that we've got to look at is when we're going through the start and acceleration, we have to put a massive amount of force into the ground. When we put a massive amount of force into the ground, okay, we want to think about our ankle applying a massive amount of force, and we don't want to lose any leak here. We want this to stay stiff so that as we come back through, Okay, as we get back through, we can plant and apply force and extend the hip and extend the knee. Then as we get to top end speed after about 25 to 30 meters, okay, we go 40, 50, 60, 70 meters. Okay, so I think it was 60 to 70 meters was where Usain Bolt hit his top speed. Then we're gonna be a little bit more upright. We're gonna ground almost flat-footed, but more like mid of the foot, okay? And we need that ankle to stay stiff. Now, if we're looking at this and we're thinking 4 to 5 times body weight is the ground reaction forces that the athlete will receive. If they're an elite world-class sprinter, we then need to think through the context of if we're getting a younger athlete to get faster, okay, we have to get them stronger first. I like to get them stronger. I like to get them more coordinated so that when they do a start or when they start to work on acceleration, they get more coordinated, they learn how to apply force, they learn the basics around the mechanics of acceleration. But based off of a lot of the research from Ken Clark, one of the big factors that he's taken note of is that when athletes sprint, like let's say 80 to 100 meters, and they work on that top end speed, okay, and they increase their total, let's say meters per second, their top velocity, that actually has a positive impact on acceleration. Now, where I'm going with this is that the worst movement that I think you could possibly do if you want to run fast, the worst movement is to distance run. And one of the big factors is if we think about the hip, okay, as whipping from the hip as we're running at top speed, that's not really happening when we're running for a long period of time. Especially when you're a little bit heavier and you're slower, you tend to shuffle, and sometimes you do heel strike. It becomes very hard over 5, 6, 7, 8 miles to have the same mechanics that you would if you were running at top speed. Okay, so if you want to run faster, don't distance run. Instead, you could focus on a longer track like a 200 meters or 100 meters, something like that. And then you can get into wicket runs. And you can really play around with wickets. With a beginner athlete, you might spread out the wickets at around 3.5 to 4 feet. And then you add 3 to 6 inches as you get through 6 to 8 wickets, and you have them with that 6 to 8 stride walk-in. If you have an athlete that needs to increase their top end speed, you might have 10 to 12 wickets if they're more advanced that are between 5 and 6 feet. That's a much more creative way to train the hip and to train that sort of ankle juncture to be stiffer so that you can then increase your overall speed. But the biggest factor is that if you want to get faster, don't distance run. As a shot putter, I would always see sprinters in college always doing this, constantly just doing crunches over and over and over again. Now, is that really what led them to be fast? No. Is that really what led them to have a six-pack? No. And in most cases, sprinters just like to do crunches like that all of the time, I think, just to get a pump so that mentally, a pump in their abs, mentally they feel like they have more tension, like they have more activation in their core. Is that gonna be the best for speed? I don't believe so, okay? What I think about with speed and with trunk control and with your core is that we should be using compound movements like a front squat, a single leg squat, a back squat, exercises like that, power cleans, full cleans, snatches, anything along those lines to increase your core control, or as we refer to this as dynamic trunk control. Okay, if we have that dynamic trunk control, then we might oscillate slightly down the track, which is key to helping us run fast. Now, if we're gonna train the trunk or abs, and we really have an athlete who just wants to get a little bit, they wanna feel sore in their abs. That's a lot of athletes, they wanna feel that soreness. I think one of the best things that we can do is get a little bit more dynamic with that core work, okay? So we might do something like this, where we wanna hold our foot in dorsiflexion, okay, and we wanna feel a little bit of hip flexion as well, and have that hip flexion linked into the abs, okay? That's gonna help you actually with that hip retraction as you're coming through into the front side mechanics. So we can go here, boom, 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 boom. And what we wanna focus on is almost having that hollow position as you're raising the foot, making sure that we continue to hold that dorsiflexion, and in turn, over a long period of time, we're gonna have a little bit better like transfer from that ab work. I think the big factor here is that when we're training abs, most athletes, when they say they want to do more core work, it has nothing to do with the fact that they're training their abs to increase their core strength. It's literally they just want to have sore abs so that they can feel better the next day. So elite sprinters love doing lunges, and I'm not saying that lunges are the worst exercises for speed. That would be distance running, leg pressing, deadlifting, and bench pressing. Okay, lunges aren't the absolute best though. And contextually, I believe that when, again, we're looking at novice, intermediate athletes, high school kids will benefit more from another movement than they would from lunges. I would still probably have them do lunges. When we think back to the discussion of acceleration and that top end speed, we have to think through the hip here, okay? And then we have to think through the ankle grounding, okay? Getting down and putting a lot of force into the ground. And so if we apply a lot of force into the ground and my heel drops, that's a leak, okay? We're gonna lose that force that would have otherwise helped propel our body down the track, okay? Or down the field or down the court, whatever we're thinking through. So when we're looking at lunging, there's a couple things that we can use to replace lunges. Now, one of the best parts around periodization with sprint-based training is that we do need to look at acceleration, change of direction, and top end speed. And these are three factors that we use when we built out Peak Strength. So if you guys head over to peakstrength.app, you can download our strength training app that now incorporates a massive amount of speed-focused training. You can get into a program based around football, based around lacrosse, based around soccer, whatever it is that you want to focus on, even sprinting, and now you can start to focus on speed-based work on specific days. You can have an entire day devoted to that speed based off of the principles that we're providing in this video. So head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Now, I'm gonna give you two exercises for beginners. I would take a beginner athlete and I would train them on just executing a simple single leg squat. Okay, here, right? Like this is easy. It's easy for me, I'm a little bit older, and if I have a younger athlete, it's a little bit harder. Okay, so they need to master the fact that they can do a single leg squat with their body weight. It's gonna light up their posterior chain with their glutes, their hamstrings, and if we bring that front foot a little bit closer, it's gonna light up their quads as well. Now, the next step, I'm actually gonna give you three exercises. I said two, but we're gonna do three. The next step would be taking this, okay, and going through and executing a single leg squat with a barbell on our back, here. Boom. As we work through that position, okay, we wanna focus on good control. Good trunk control, don't collapse. Now we're starting to see a lot of discussion around the spinal engine and the importance of the spine, okay, in regards to speed. And some of the rotation that we might see from the pelvic area when they're sprinting at full speed, or even when we're doing any other type of locomotion. I actually think the single leg squat sort of shows you that just very slightly, we'll see very slight hip rotation, Now, the one movement that I really, really love to train, which is going to lead to a very, very stable ankle and that trunk control and the strength in the posterior chain, is going to involve an isometric, okay? And when we can master isometrics, but then also do active isometrics, which would be doing a movement while one specific joint is holding an isometric, okay, then we can get really, really effective at training. Now, I don't know if I can handle this weight without actually warming up and focusing on this, but let's look at it, okay? We're gonna do a heel elevated single leg squat. So I would get into position, and this is something that we use inside of Peak Strength. We're gonna progress you from doing that single leg squat into a single leg squat with a barbell, into a single leg squat with a heel unsupported position if you're focusing on speed. So my whole goal is that my heel does not drop. Remember, when we're focusing on acceleration, top end speed, we don't want our heel striking, okay? It might strike slightly at top end speed, very, very slightly, but it will not strike at all when we're focusing on acceleration. Here, down, boom, boom, boom. That wasn't bad. Now, the whole focus there is that we want to keep this whole juncture stiff. We want to apply force down into the mid part of our foot forward, and then have the knee extend and the hip extend, okay, without losing that force. A very simple drill to teach your athlete would be if they go here, they actually might lose some force and they'll start to fall forward, they'll lose that stability. This is a very good slow moving drill that you can then use to teach your athlete to accelerate faster at higher speeds, okay? So use this progression, single leg squat with the body, then get into some barbell weighted stuff, then get into that isometric position, because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.